5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Guy had just turned 16 when it happened. It was a Saturday evening in early October, right when the autumn chill was starting to settle over our town in upstate New York. My parents had driven to Albany for a wedding reception and told me they wouldn't return until well after midnight. The house was mine for the night. I texted my childhood friend Marcus, who lived 2 houses down the block. We were the same age and had been inseparable since elementary school, usually. We'd hang out in my attic game room, playing video games or streaming movies. But that particular evening we found ourselves restless and bored with our usual routine. Out of nowhere, Marcus suggested we play hide and seek. I laughed at first. It seemed childish for 2 16-year-olds. But then I remembered the last time we played it with a larger group during a power outage, and how genuinely thrilling it had been. The house wasn't massive, but it had 3 floors and plenty of shadowy corners, especially with most of the lights off. We decided to make it more intense by turning off every light except the one over the stove in the kitchen. The orange glow barely reached beyond the doorway, leaving the rest of the house draped in darkness. The rules we established were straightforward. No leaving the property, no hiding in the attic crawl space or the utility closet where the water heater lived. Everything else, bedrooms, bathrooms, the finished basement, under furniture, was fair territory. Marcus volunteered to hide first. I positioned myself in the den with my hands covering my eyes, counting slowly to 60 while listening to his footsteps thundering through the house before fading to silence. When I reached 60, I called out that I was coming and began my search. I started in the kitchen since I was already nearby, checking behind the pantry door and inside the broom closet. Nothing. I moved down the first-floor hallway, peeking into the powder room and the coat closet near the front entrance. Empty. I climbed the stairs to the second floor, each step groaning under my weight. Every small sound, the house settling, the refrigerator humming downstairs, the wind rattling a window made my pulse quicken. I searched my parents' master bedroom first, looking under their king-sized bed and behind the tall dresser. No, Marcus. I continued to my own bedroom down the hall. My room was cluttered with clothes and sports equipment, but not enough to hide a full-grown teenager effectively. Still, I checked the closet and under my desk. Nothing. That left the spare bedroom at the end of the corridor. The door stood slightly ajar. I pushed it open slowly, half expecting Marcus to jump out screaming, but the room remained dark and silent. I stepped inside carefully, my eyes adjusting to the dimness. I knelt down to check under the bed. Empty. I opened the closet door. Just old coats and storage boxes. Figuring he must have gone to the basement after all, I headed back downstairs. The basement was partially finished. We had a TV area, but also a laundry space and storage sections that were still just concrete and exposed beams. I checked behind the washing machine and dryer, then searched through the shelving units in the storage area. I was about to admit defeat when I finally spotted him wedged behind some plastic bins full of holiday decorations. He burst out laughing, asking how long it had taken me to find him. I told him it felt like forever. We switched roles. This time Marcus counted while I hid. I decided to go back upstairs to the spare bedroom and slide under the guest bed, making sure to pull the bed skirt down completely to conceal myself. Lying there in the darkness, I could feel my heartbeat accelerating with nervous excitement. After a few minutes, I heard Marcus's footsteps ascending the stairs. They sounded deliberate and slow, creating a rhythm against the wooden floor. He opened the bathroom door first, then moved into my parents' bedroom. I could hear him opening closets and moving things around. Eventually, his footsteps approached down the hallway toward the spare room where I was hiding. I heard him enter, his breathing slightly labored from climbing the stairs. His sneakers made soft shuffling sounds against the carpet. He paused near the bed. I held my breath completely, trying to remain as still as possible. His shoes moved again, closer to the bed, then silence. A long, uncomfortable silence that seemed to stretch endlessly. I expected him to pull up the bed skirt any second, but instead, his footsteps retreated. He walked out of the room and I heard him continue down the hallway. I lay there for several more minutes, waiting for him to call out that I'd won, but the house remained eerily quiet. No sounds at all. Finally, I crawled out from under the bed and made my way downstairs, expecting to find Marcus lounging on the couch or raiding the kitchen. He wasn't there. I called out that the game was over. A voice responded from the basement, saying he was still down there looking. I felt confused. How could he be in the basement? I walked to the basement door, pulled it open, and shouted down the stairwell. He shouted back up, asking where I'd been hiding. His voice sounded genuinely confused. My stomach knotted. I told him I'd been under the guest bed upstairs the entire time. A second later, I heard him climbing the basement stairs. He emerged into the kitchen, looking baffled. He asked how I'd gotten upstairs so quickly. I insisted I'd been there the whole time, that I never left my hiding spot. He frowned deeply and said he could have sworn he'd checked that room. More than that, he said he'd heard someone breathing in there. He said he'd paused right next to the bed because the breathing sounded so close. I told him I'd held my breath when he came in. We went back and forth for a minute, neither of us able to make sense of it, before finally shrugging it off as a misunderstanding. We decided to play another round, but I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled over me. Every creak of the house made me jump. During the next round, while I was counting, I thought I heard a soft thump from upstairs, like something falling. But when I went to investigate, all the rooms were empty. I found Marcus hiding in the laundry room behind the ironing board. We kept playing for another hour, but my heart wasn't in it anymore. So, eventually, we gave up and collapsed onto the couch in the den, turning the TV back onto a late-night comedy show. That's when we both went rigid. From upstairs came a loud, distinct thud like something heavy hitting the floor. Marcus immediately asked if my parents had come home early. I reminded him they were still at the reception in Albany, at least 2 hours away. The hair on my arms stood straight up. We sat frozen on the couch, staring at each other, waiting. The house fell silent again. Marcus tried to rationalize it, suggesting maybe something had fallen off a shelf or a window had blown open. I wanted to believe him, but then we both heard it clearly, the unmistakable creak of floorboards. Someone was walking slowly down the upstairs hallway. We stared at each other, neither of us breathing. Then I whispered that we should go check. Marcus shook his head vigorously, his eyes wide, but I pointed out that if someone had broken in, we couldn't just sit there and do nothing. I grabbed the fireplace poker from its stand next to the couch and gestured for Marcus to follow me. We crept toward the stairs and began climbing them, moving as quietly as possible. The house seemed to hold its breath with us. Each step groaned softly under our weight. When we reached the top of the stairs, I pointed toward the spare bedroom. The door was now completely closed. I knew with absolute certainty that we'd left it open. We stood paralyzed in the hallway. Then, from behind that closed door, came a sound that made my blood run cold as slow, dragging noise like fabric being pulled across carpet. Marcus grabbed my arm and whispered urgently that we needed to leave. I wanted to agree, but curiosity mixed with fear kept me rooted in place. I raised the poker, reached for the doorknob, and I'm not exaggerating when I say my hands were trembling violently, pushed the door open fast. The room beyond was dark, but I could make out the shapes of the furniture. Nobody was visible. The closet door stood halfway open. I moved closer as Marcus remained in the doorway. I yanked the closet door fully open, ready to swing the poker. Inside was nothing but hanging coats and stacked boxes. We both released shaky laughs. trying to convince ourselves we'd imagined everything. But then, just as we turned to leave the room, we heard another sound, this time from downstairs. The distinct sound of the front door opening and then closing. We froze completely. Marcus whispered that someone was definitely in the house now. My stomach felt like it had dropped into my feet. We ran down the hall and ducked into my bedroom, turning off the light and pressing ourselves against the wall. I gripped the poker so tightly my knuckles ached. We listened intently. At first, there was nothing. Then we heard faint footsteps on the first floor, moving slowly through the rooms. I desperately wanted to call the police, but my phone was sitting on the coffee table downstairs where we'd been, watching TV. Marcus whispered that maybe we could climb out the window, but we were on the second floor and the drop was too high. The only way out was back down the hallway, past the stairs. The footsteps grew closer. We heard the basement door open, then heard someone descending those stairs one step at a time. We both let out quiet, shaky breaths of relief. Whoever it was had gone into the basement. We took that opportunity to run. We sprinted down the hallway, flew down the stairs, tore through the kitchen, and burst out the back door into the yard. 3. We didn't stop running until we reached Marcus's house. His parents were home watching a late-night talk show. When we told them what had happened, both of us talking over each other. Out of breath and terrified, his father immediately called the police. 2 officers arrived within 10 minutes and searched my entire house from top to bottom. They checked every room, every closet, the basement, even the attic crawl space we'd declared off-limits for the game. They found nothing. No signs of forced entry, no broken windows, no one hiding anywhere. They told us it was probably just the old house settling, or our imaginations running wild while playing a scary game in the dark. But Marcus and I both knew what we'd heard. We knew someone had been inside. There was no doubt in either of our minds. For weeks afterward, I barely slept. Every creak and groan of the house settling made me think someone was in the hallway outside my room. That was the absolute last time I played hide-and-seek. Marcus and I never really discussed it much after that night, but sometimes when we make eye contact, I can tell we're both remembering. Remembering the night hide-and-seek became something much more sinister. Even now, years later, I still think about it. I think about the sound of footsteps in the hallway upstairs. I think about the dragging noise inside the spare room. I think about the front door opening and closing. We never found out who it was. Maybe a burglar who realized the house wasn't empty and decided to leave when we ran. Maybe someone who slipped out when we fled to Marcus's house. All I know for certain is that playing hide-and-seek that night taught us just how terrifying it is to realize you're not alone in what should be the safety of your own home.